Good morning. Welcome to South Church. Whether you celebrate Passover, Ramadan, spring equinox, Easter, the Easter Bunny, or any other holiday or religion, some of them, none of them, you are welcome. Whether you come filled with joy for the warm sunshine this past week, or with anxiety about the state of our world, whatever you brought with you today, you are welcome. My name is Lissa Mascio. I am a member of a team of worship associates who have the honor of working with our settled minister, Ellen Quadras, our director of Lifespan Ministries, Kirsten Hunter, who will be leading the service today, and the rest of our wonderful staff, some of whom you see, others are behind the scenes, who bring worship services each week. The gift of music today comes from Susan Adams, Johnny Pfeiffer, and members of the South Church Choir. The children's story will be led by Jen Del Deo today. Please know that listening devices are available at the rear of the sanctuary, and we also have large print hymnals. All are invited for the coffee hour downstairs after the service, if you have any room after the pancakes, I think many of you had before the service. We also respectfully request that you silence your cell phone for the duration of the service. And now for some announcements.
Good morning. 2 announcements today. One is that next Saturday for Earth Day, there will be a garden cleanup happening on the property outside here at church, and everybody is welcome to help with that. Bring gloves and rakes if you have them, and that will happen from 9 a.m. to noon. The other announcement is a reminder that 2 weeks from today, April 30th, is the installation for Kirsten and Reverend Ellen. And if you haven't RSVP'd, it's helpful if you could do that. That's at 3 p.m. on April 30th. Thank you.
These are words from George Saunders in his book, A Swim in a Pond in the Rain. Nothing, not one thing hurts us more or causes us to hurt others more than our certainties. The stories we tell ourselves about the world and the foregone conclusions with which we cork the fount of possibility are the supreme downfall of our consciousness. They are also the inevitable cost of survival, of navigating a vast and complex reality of which remains forever beyond our control and comprehension. And yet, in our effort to parse the world, we sever ourselves from the full range of its beauty, tensing against the tenderness of life.
If you're watching us remotely today, I invite you to light your own candle at home while Kirsten lights the chalice in the sanctuary. As she lights the chalice, I would like to share this quote from The War of Art, Winning the Inner Creative Battle by Stephen Pressfield. The more important a call or action is to our soul's evolution, the more resistance we will feel toward pursuing it. Now please join us and rise and join us in reciting our mission statement, which is printed in your order of service. At South Church, we nurture spiritual growth through worship, learning, and community. We celebrate the worth and dignity of all people, and we inspire one another to act on our faith in a larger community. I really struggled today with what I wanted to say on April's topic of resistance. Most of us are familiar with the traditional forms of resistance, social rebellion, picket lines, and protests, from Selma to Stonewall to Black Lives Matter. And many of us resist the unrelenting social pressures of keeping up with the Joneses, that busyness is a virtue, and to always present that picture-perfect Instagram life. And a lot of us have probably also experienced the quieter, more intimate pressures and inner struggle of resistance, bucking the pressure to conform in our day-to-day lives from family, friends, or partners. These may seem like less life or death struggles than marches in the street against gun violence, but they have no less of an impact on our own feelings of self-worth, self-confidence, or autonomy. In my own family, a large, boisterous Italian one based mainly in New York, there are some weird rules that I've never felt comfortable living by. If you invite one cousin to an event, you have to invite all 37, 3 layers deep. If you give a school picture to one uncle, you're supposed to give to all the paternal siblings, regardless of the fact that you spend every single holiday under the roof of one and haven't seen the other in years. And if you know how expensive school pictures are, you'll know why I don't buy dozens and just hand them out willy-nilly. But it's more than just about money. I've always felt that an actual bond, an authentic connection with people is much more important to me than who you happen to be related to and at what level. And I've lived my life paying much more respect to those important and mutual bonds. My family also seems to deeply value continuity above much else, like staying in one place, at one job, and with one person, regardless of how those people, places, and careers make you feel, or whether you might hold different values that are better served elsewhere. I myself have moved dozens and dozens of times since leaving high school and the state of New Hampshire. I have held many jobs and in fact pursued several vastly different careers and have certainly been in many more relationships than a vast majority of my relatives. So every time I see some of them, they ask where I live now, not even bothering to remember the city that I have lived in for 5 years, and sometimes not even which state I'm in. When I get a new job, like recently, an exciting new career change to me, all I get is oh, you've changed jobs again? As though sticking with a position that isn't a good fit or doesn't make me feel valued or even paid well is worth sticking it out just so Uncle Steve feels like I've stayed long enough. I wonder if they realize that most of my employers can replace me almost instantly and frankly don't seem to put any effort into retaining me, much less worrying about me once I'm gone. Does my family really think I shouldn't have left New Hampshire back when I was 17 years old, or should have stuck with that first early marriage at 21 to a man no one liked, and for good reason it turned out? Or maybe they wanted me to stick it out at my very first law firm I landed at in Phoenix, Arizona in 2006, a white-collar medical malpractice defense firm that felt like it was sucking out my very soul. But I was making 6 figures straight out of law school, so Uncle Steve liked that. My daughter, who is starting to look at colleges and is considering career options, said to me recently, "Wow, Mom, that's great that you care more about your morals than money." She did not mean it as a compliment, especially since my income has steadily declined over most of the last 15 years of my legal career, among many careers and side ventures, and it has sometimes made our life more difficult. But I am proud to say, yes, I do care more about doing a job that feels good and righteous and important than about money. And I'm glad I made most of the changes I did, lived all of the places, had all of the jobs, met all of the people, experienced all of the things. In fact, if I hadn't left New Hampshire 17 years ago, I wouldn't even have my daughter. But little does my daughter know that every decision to buck the trend, every snide remark at the holiday table, every smaller paycheck, it was a hard decision and an act of base resistance to live my life the way I wanted to. As the character Letty Lutz in The Greatest Showman sings, "When the sharpest words want to cut me down, I'm going to send a flood. I'm going to drown them out. This is brave. This is bruised. This is who I'm meant to be. This is me." Now please rise as you're able and join in singing not "This Is Me" from The Greatest Showman, but hymn number 357 in the gray hymnal, "Bright Morning Stars."
I would love to invite all children to come up to this area to hear a story. And that includes any adult who is a kid at heart. The story I have for you today is almost all true. The part that isn't true is the names are different, but otherwise, this is a true story. Once upon a time, there was a teen named Kit. Kit went to high school, was a really good student, got good grades, and did all the things they were supposed to do. But Kit didn't love school so much. They only had a couple of friends at school. Most of their friends didn't go to their school. And they weren't into sports or clubs or things like that. So they went to school, they did their stuff, and just kind of tried to get through it. Sometimes Kit would have a teacher that they thought was great. They had a teacher that they loved, and that was fun. Most teachers were fine, did all right. And then once in a while, Kit would get a teacher that they just really didn't like. Because not all teachers are a good fit for every person. And this one year, that teacher for Kit was Ms. Biz. Kit did not love Ms. Biz. But Kit tolerated the things that they didn't agree with Ms. Biz and went to class and did what they were supposed to. And there was another kid in that class that year who was an exchange student from Romania, which is a country far away. And that person came to this country to experience what it would be like to have school in the US. And Kit got to know this student a little bit, and the person's name was spelled O-A-N-A, pronounced Ona. And that's not a name that we really hear around here. And so Kit loved hearing the stories about what life is like in Romania. And that helped Kit like Ms. Biz's class a little bit more. And every day, Ms. Biz would take attendance at the start of class. And every day, Ms. Biz would get to that name, O-A-N-A, and it didn't quite fit with Ms. Biz's brain to pronounce that name as Ona. So Ms. Biz would get to that point on the attendance list and go, Oana. And every day, Ona would just correct Ms. Biz and say Ona to help her learn her name, and they would move on. Then there was one day where Ms. Biz was doing attendance, and they got to that name, Oana, and Ona said, Ona, and Ms. Biz must have been having a grouchy day, and she kind of flew off the handle. And she said, you need to stop correcting me. I tried and tried to learn your name, and I can't do it. And you're embarrassing me, and you need to stop. Well, Kit watched this, and when this was happening, it felt like slow motion, and Kit started to feel angry about this. Because Kit had learned at home and at church not to let people treat each other poorly, and this felt like one of those situations. But Kit also didn't try to make disturbances at school. They did what they were supposed to, and they certainly didn't talk back to teachers. So Kit really wanted to stand up and talk to Ms. Biz and say, you stop talking like that. That is not kind. Because that was the way that Ms. Biz was talking, and Kit wanted to stop that behavior. But they didn't. They didn't do that. They sat and they watched and kind of sat paralyzed and looked around at the other kids. Some of the kids kind of smirked. A lot of the kids just watched like Kit, but nobody said anything. And Ona kind of had big eyes and just watched too. And so the rest of the class went along, and Kit didn't really catch what was happening in that class because they were really thinking about this thing that had happened. And so then, finally, class gets done, and the bell rings, and everybody's leaving to go to their next classes. And Kit waited. And when all the other kids had gone, Kit went up to Ms. Biz and said, "Ms. Biz, I think you owe Ona an apology. That didn't feel kind, what you did." And Kit said, "Ona had to learn a whole language to come here. And the least we can do to be welcoming is to keep trying to learn her name. Would you like me to help you learn how to say Ona's name?" And Ms. Biz said, "Yes, that would be really helpful." So Ms. Biz got out a little notepad and a pen and started taking notes. And Kit said, "Okay, so the first part is own. Like, I own a pen." And so Ms. Biz was taking notes. "Okay, own. I got it. And Kit said, "Okay, and then the next part is And okay, Ms. Biz took notes. So Ms. Biz made notes about how she could remember how to say Ona. And then Kit was patient, and she said, "Okay, so then you put it together. Own, And Ms. Biz was like, "Own, And Kit said, yeah, Ona. Ms. Biz said, Ona. And they were like, "Yeah, great, you got it." And Ms. Biz put those little notes on their computer right where they would see it every day during attendance. And so Kit left to go to their next class. And then Ms. Biz, after Kit left, Ms. Biz went to Ona's next class, called Ona out into the hall, and said, "Ona, I'm sorry. That was not appropriate the way that I acted in class. And I'm going to try really hard to get your name right from now on." And then Ona went back to class, Ms. Biz went back to class, and from then on, Ms. Biz said Ona's name properly. And I often think about this story, and I wonder what would have happened if Kit had stopped in that moment and just yelled back at Ms. Biz the way that Ms. Biz yelled at Ona. I'm wondering if that would have made the same kind of change that it had happened the way that Kit had done it, by waiting, taking a couple of deep breaths, and then approaching Ms. Biz in a kinder way than Ms. Biz had done. It's something to think about. And now it's time for us to go downstairs.
Each week at the Offertory, we give what we are able in order to support our beloved community here at South Church, the building, the staff, congregants, and the greater community. You can give right here in the baskets that are about to be passed via cash or check, online at southchurchuu.org, by mail to the church office, or by using the Vanco app. In an effort coordinated by our social justice associates, each month we share that collection with a different nonprofit organization. During the month of April, our collection will be shared with an organization near and dear to my heart, the Dover Children's Home, a nonprofit intermediate-level residential treatment program designed to provide a wide array of community-based services for youths ages 10 to 20, including crucial transitional services for youth aging out of the child welfare system, often without many of the necessary life skills and long-term connections necessary to a successful launch into adulthood. As I mentioned earlier, I recently made a career change back into this child welfare arena, and I can tell you how much difference a well-run, trauma-informed residential placement like Dover Children's Home can provide to youth and families who are going through a very challenging time. For more information, you can visit them online. The offering will now be gratefully received.
As we come into a time of meditation and prayer, I have been thinking about parents this week. It's been a rough one. And I've just been holding you in my heart. I'm sorry. I'm sorry about this world that we're living in right now. I'm sorry that there are so many guns. I'm sorry that there are so many threats. I'm sorry that we seem so paralyzed. I wish it was different. I wish our kids were growing up in a different place. And don't let it pull you down. Don't let it keep you from seeing what's beautiful in them and around them. Don't let it keep you from knowing that there's hope. This is an excerpt from a prayer written by Zolani Casella, Reverend Dr. Zolani Casella. He says, "Spirit of life, help us to find our way through the turmoil that turns people against each other instead of turning toward each other in love. Help us to see that little good ever comes out of viewing each other as the other. Only when we find our common humanity can we coexist peacefully and with loving kindness. As exasperated as we may become, we go on. The future beckons us to come to it bearing a faith and resolve that passes all understanding. Like the birds of the air that can't help but sing their morning songs, we too have a song. We sing of love, forgiveness, grace, mercy, compassion, friendship, care, trust, and the ability to transcend our circumstances. We ask this prayer in the name of all persons, present and absent, remembered and forgotten, known and unknown. Amen, Ashe, and may it be so." Whatever you bring with you this morning in your heart, whatever you are feeling, I invite you to come forward and light a candle for a prayer, for a joy, for a concern, or something that you want to share in this space through the lighting of a flame. And if you're struggling, you're not alone, please reach out. There are pastoral care cards in your pews. You can write to us and bring those forward, or hand them to me, or any of our ushers or greeters this morning. As we come forward, come down the side aisles, and you can return to your seats up the center. This past January, for our New Year's service, those of you who attended were invited to think of living with a question instead of making a resolution. It was a practice I had engaged a few times over the past several years, and I've found it to be a really transformational experience doing that, holding a question day in and day out. Living with a question opens us to possibility without knowing where we might arrive. It's an open invitation to curiosity. This month, as we embarked on an exploration of this theme of resistance, Kathy Okeisen recommended a book to me, Living Resistance. The book is written by Caitlin Curtis, a Potawatomi woman. It is an indigenous vision for seeking wholeness every day. And when you know it, right in chapter 1, she invites the readers to think of 5 questions that you are holding in yourself right now. They can be anything, she said. She offered a few of her own questions as examples. She said, I am wondering, what does true solidarity require of me? I'm thinking about how can I make my porch more welcoming? I'm thinking about how should I navigate social media in a healthier way? What plants do I want to plant in my spring garden? How can I tangibly let my kids know that I love them? Curiosity, she says, takes root in us as children, but as we get older, we are taught to trade curiosity for security. And often that security is baked into the status quo of society, of capitalism, which in reality is anything but secure for many of us. So as adults, many of us on the path of healing are realizing we must reclaim our curiosity toward ourselves and the land around us. End quote. Before reading this book, I had never quite made that connection between the practice of resistance and the practice of curiosity. But it makes so much sense. Of course, they are interconnected parts of a journey toward liberation. For a long time, I've thought about resistance in the context of liberation as something akin to the artwork on the cover of your order of service. That piece is created by artist and activist Ricardo Levins Morales. The words in the image say, "Power comes from below, from the hidden places where it gathers until, discovering itself, it blazes into view, lighting the sky and reshaping the landscape, sweeping away barriers it seemed would stand forever." I look at that image and I picture Angela Davis and Gloria Steinem with their fists raised in the 1970s, or Colin Kaepernick taking a knee in 2016. This is the kind of righteous resistance I imagine when I look at his image, and there are so many current examples right now. The Tennessee Three, our trans siblings who are showing up at the State House in New Hampshire, who have been showing up at the State House in New Hampshire and across the country, who are going back to the State House in New Hampshire this week to speak out against HB 272. Please engage in that issue. Indigenous water protectors, incredible protests, and long-term fights against new pipelines out there protecting the thing that is most precious to all of us, to our very survival. Immigrant rights groups fighting policies that criminalize asylum seekers, workers protesting against Starbucks in Seattle in an effort to unionize. The list goes on. We notice these moments when power blazes into view. Even Morales, as he names those acts of resistance, even as he names that they are not singular moments, even as he tries to draw our attention to that lava underground, he actually is kind of centering them at the same time, right? We don't always remember, and often we don't know all of what led up to these moments of eruption. We don't see how interconnected the lava is underground. In any given example, there are some who find themselves in that surge, but most of us are watching from the side, witnessing resistance, admiring it maybe, looking for ways to support it perhaps, but feeling at least a little bit removed, separate from it. Watching from the sideline, sparks flare up and they fizzle down. Watching from the sideline, we often forget that we are a part of that lava even when nothing is flaring. The network of movement, of change. I have so long thought about Morales' image as intending to expand people's vision of how resistance works, to demonstrate that there is a place for each of us to help gather and discover our power, that it's not all about the moments when it surges into view, but we all can be a part of it. But we're facing so many challenges in this world. It's hard to stay hopeful. It's hard to believe that and stay engaged. It's hard to believe we can make a difference. It's easy to succumb to the fear that it won't get better. The 18th century philosopher Edmund Burke said, "No passion so effectually robs the mind of all its powers of acting and reasoning as fear." Human beings with power have long understood that fear is a tool of control. And people with power in our country right now recognize how effective fear is in preventing people from engaging in thoughtful change. We are facing paralyzing gun violence, a climate crisis that continues to accelerate. Our health system is a mess. Our school systems are a mess. The intensity of hate-filled political maneuvering continues. And all of it makes us afraid. Afraid for the people who are on the margins right now, afraid for our children, afraid for the future. Fear, which then makes us reactive instead of proactive. Fear, which prevents us from pacing ourselves,
from building networks, fear which makes us grasp at the things that bring short-term comfort, that feed scarcity mindsets, that foster divisiveness and inhibit our capacity to do the very thing that actually would help us move in the right direction. And this world piles on other obligations too, work and volunteering and kids if you have them, sports and activities, social activities, music lessons, time to visit family, exercise, housework, and on and on. We are kept so busy it isolates us from one another. It's no wonder that we struggle to find endurance for this fight. Life is relentless in late-stage capitalism. There is no time to breathe, no time to go outside and sit by a tree and feel how we belong to one another. After reading Curtis's book, I am thinking differently about practicing resistance. That picture on the cover of the Order of Service doesn't work quite right for me now. She describes resistance as the way we use our everyday lives to exert energy against the dangerous status quo of our time. And then she says something that is absolutely essential. Resistance cannot only be about what we are against. Resistance cannot only be about what we are against. When we choose to resist something or someone, we are also choosing something else on the other side. Perhaps we're choosing ourselves. Perhaps we're choosing inclusive love or a more just society. We resist ableism or racism because we know there is a better way. There is a way. This is the way that resistance works. We must find and create that better way together. This changes everything. First, I love how she frames the dangerous status quo of our time. That was really helpful for me. It makes me think of Marie Kondo, of her method for organizing your house. Does this bring me joy? I can think about the status quo in any given moment, from any level, from micro to macro. Does this thing that I'm doing serve a better future? The war machine, my own lifestyle. Where is the status quo and what things about it? What norms? What are the choices I make every day that I don't even notice that are actually dangerous? And if each time we practice resistance, we also have to choose something else on the other side, doing that compels us to turn away from what is wrong, to turn away from what is causing us to feel fear. In its place, we have to turn toward hope. What could be? And from a place of hope, we set a direction and then we can embark. It's a simple shift, but it feels profound. I can't think of a better example than the story that Jen Del Deo shared this morning. That was a true story. That happened. That happened exactly the way she told it. That is living resistance. That student observed the dangerous status quo of their time, but they didn't react. They first thought to themselves, what do I want to replace it with? Here's this thing. I don't like this thing. I'm resisting this thing. This isn't good. This is dangerous. But what's over here? And so they sat there in that room for however long they sat there and figured out a path to go over here. They had a direction. And then they walked up to that teacher and they weren't angry and they weren't accusatory and they weren't speaking down. And they invited them into consideration and they offered them the path that they'd imagined. That student didn't learn that in this way, but they're doing it. That's young people for you. This is why you should all be spending time with young people. They're brilliant. They are brilliant. They get it. They haven't been taught not to get it. They get it. And so when we're with them, then we can kind of get it too. Curtis tells her readers that we are human beings. We have not yet arrived, but we are continually arriving. She repeats this many times throughout the book, and it helps to remember. We're human beings. We are continually arriving. We're whole. We've been trained to go and go and go, to compartmentalize and organize our tasks. If we're practicing resistance at all, it's in a 2-hour block on Wednesday. But if we return to curiosity, if we remember we are humans, a part of the natural world, we belong here, we have a place here, there is a way to find balance here. If we think about the dangerous status quo of our time, if we know it exists and we keep our eye out for it, and then we use our everyday lives to exert energy against it while looking toward a different future, we can reclaim our wholeness. Resistance can be sustainable and embodied. South Church, it is no small thing that we have one another. At its best, this community is using our collective energy against the dangerous status quo of our time. From this place, from the macro to the micro. I was sitting in the sanctuary last night in a ring of chairs with several parents. They had a kind of a sneak peek to this sermon. We wrote 5 questions each. I listened to those parents sharing with one another what it feels like to be raising kids right now. The challenges of trying to live resistance. I listened to them share experiences and express frustrations. I listened to their grief in seeing the dangerous status quo and not knowing what to do about it. It is hard to exert our energy against these things alone. Lissa described that feeling also in her opening words. There is so much pressure towards doing it the way everybody else is doing it. It's hard to push against it alone, but we are not alone. We're not alone. I know that I say this like every time I stand up here, and maybe it sounds empty, but it's the biggest thing. We're not alone. All of us are so much more powerful than any one of us, and we have each other to strategize. We have each other to talk about what is that other way? What does it look like? How do we do it? What have you tried? What's working? What didn't work? How did that feel? That's resistance. That's resistance. I'm energized by the potential of this community. Maybe you can tell. We have and we continue to build a congregation that is connected to a whole bunch of other communities of resistance. There is lava, not the kind you have to avoid, but the kind that keeps us warm. I know that doesn't really exist. Play with me here. We pool our resources of time and money here. That is resistance. We serve young people in this community. That is resistance. We support small group gatherings and share how we're doing in community meetings. We ask each other, how are you? And we really mean it. We want to know, how are you, really? There's a book discussion last week on braiding sweetgrass, another tremendously inspiring vision for wholeness. And I listened to the people in that book group sharing what inspired them, grieving the continued reality of fear about the future, people holding each other in care, learning together, sharing ideas. People are scared to start the journey of transformation because they don't know when they will be done, says Curtis. But you are always arriving. It's not about being done. It's about being present to the moment, being open to unlearning and learning, trust building trust with one another, doing the work of love. This isn't work that we will ever finish. But when we're curious, getting finished isn't really important. The joy is in the journey. Caitlin Curtis writes this, a list. How do we resist? We resist by breathing, by gardening, by telling the truth, by reading banned books, by singing love songs, by grieving, by trying again, by not giving up on ourselves, by challenging what we think we know, by knowing that love is always there, by trusting future generations, by drawing pictures, by fighting ableism, by petting dogs, by telling your body it matters, by sending flowers to a tired friend, by reaching out when you might need flowers, by dreaming of an anti-racist world, by meditating when things get hard, by being patient with yourself, by setting healthy boundaries, by believing in solidarity, by refusing to other your kin. That's everyone. By writing in that journal, by saying hello to Mother Earth every day, by listening to music, by writing music, by deconstructing what you once knew, by asking what it all means, by admitting we know nothing, by honoring humility, by honoring the children, by becoming like children, by dancing in a snowstorm, by holding someone's hand, by holding your own hand, by breathing deep. Again, by saying yes to all the magic that is, by saying no to the status quo of harm, by honoring whatever realm you are in. Her book talks about 4 realms. By honoring all the spaces in between, by honoring this moment, this time, this embodiment. This is living resistance. May it be so. I invite you to stand and join me in singing hymn number 145 in your gray hymnal.
We extinguish this flame, but not the light of truth, the warmth of community, or the fire of commitment. These we carry in our hearts until we are together again.
Justin Pearson of the Tennessee 3 was in the airport this past week, And Joan Baez was too. And she spotted him. And she walked up to him, from what I understand. And I don't know everything that they said to one another, but I can imagine the feeling of it. What I do know is that they sang some spirituals together and they recorded it for social media, so don't tell me social media is all bad. They sang "We Shall Overcome," and they sang "Ain't Gonna Let Nobody Turn Me Around," and they sent it out to all of us. We are not alone. Let's resist.
I'd love your help singing us out with the Postlude, inspired by Justin Jones and Joan Baez. We'll sing "Ain't Gonna Let Nobody Turn Me Around." If you don't know it, ain't gonna let nobody turn me around, turn me around, turn me around. Ain't gonna let nobody turn me around. Keep on a-walking, keep on a-talking, marching on to freedom land. And so that will be the first time through. Second time, ain't gonna let gun lobbies turn me around. Third time, ain't gonna let trans hatred turn me around. And then we'll finish up with ain't gonna let nobody. Join us, please.